Some scars never fade. Not the ones on skin, the ones buried deep inside the person you used to be. The version of you who believed the person sleeping beside you would never become your greatest fear. I learned that on a freezing November night, when rain slammed against the apartment windows so hard it sounded like the world was breaking apart. And then my husband hit me harder. Have you ever realized in a single second that your entire life was a lie? Because that was the moment mine shattered. My name is Elena Brooks. 3 years earlier, I thought I had married the perfect man. Ryan Carter was charming, attentive, the kind of guy who remembered your coffee order and kissed your forehead in grocery store lines. I worked as a pediatric nurse in Seattle, pulling long shifts and saving every dollar I could. Ryan always said we were building a future together. I believed him. That was my first mistake. The truth is, abuse never starts with bruises. It starts quietly. A sarcastic comment, a little control, a complaint about your friends. Then, suddenly you realize you haven't spoken to half the people you love in months, because he doesn't like them. Ryan controlled everything slowly, like poison dripping into water, especially money. Every paycheck I deposited somehow disappeared faster than it should have. Every time I questioned him, he had another excuse, another story, another reason I should trust him. That Tuesday night, I finally asked to see our bank statements. That's all I asked. One simple question. Ryan stared at me with this terrifying calmness that was worse than screaming. "You think I'm stealing from you?" he asked quietly. I tried to stay calm. I said I only wanted transparency. Then he kicked the cabinet beside my head so violently the sound exploded through the kitchen. I stumbled backward, slammed into the counter, and crashed onto the floor. Pain ripped through my ribs so sharply I couldn't breathe. And do you know what hurt most? It was the fact that he looked down at me like I meant absolutely nothing. Then he grabbed his keys and walked out. I lay there on the cold kitchen floor trying to breathe while rain hammered the windows. And then I heard tiny footsteps. "Mama?" My 6-year-old son Liam stood in the doorway, wearing dinosaur pajamas and clutching his stuffed rabbit. His little face looked terrified. I forced a smile and whispered, "I slipped, baby." But children know. They always know. He sat beside me quietly and leaned against my shoulder. Then, after a minute, he reached into his pajama pocket and pulled out my phone. "Call Grandpa," he whispered. I still remember the way my chest broke hearing that, because my son already knew who made us feel safe. My father, Daniel Brooks, lived in Portland. Retired history teacher. Tomato garden in the backyard. Old pickup truck. The kind of man who called every Sunday without fail, just to ask if I'd eaten dinner. Ryan hated him, said he was too involved. Over time, I stopped answering Dad's calls around Ryan. I started calling him secretly from hospital parking lots. That night, shaking on the kitchen floor, I finally dialed his number. He answered instantly. I could barely speak. "Dad." There was silence for 1 second before he asked, "What's the address, sweetheart?" No questions, no judgment, just action. He drove nearly 3 hours through a storm and reached Seattle before 1 in the morning. Liam and I hid in the bedroom the entire time. When Dad knocked 3 times on the door like he promised, I opened it and completely fell apart. I sobbed into his flannel shirt like a child. He held me while Liam fell asleep on his shoulder. Then my father looked at me and quietly said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the screaming, the money, the manipulation, the isolation. The moments I convinced myself it wasn't that bad. My father listened without interrupting once. When I finished, his eyes looked older somehow. Then he said something that changed my life forever. "You are not staying here another night." We packed 2 bags in less than an hour. Liam's rabbit, school books, important documents I'd secretly hidden months earlier, without even admitting to myself why. Somewhere deep down, part of me had already known I might need to escape. The next morning, doctors confirmed I had 2 cracked ribs. And that's when everything exploded. A lawyer named Victoria Hale took my case. Smart, ruthless, impossible to intimidate. She subpoenaed financial records and uncovered something so sickening it made the abuse feel small in comparison. Ryan hadn't just been draining our savings account. He had another family, another woman, another apartment across town, another child. For nearly 2 years while I worked double hospital shifts and handed over every paycheck, my husband had been secretly funding a second life using my money. Almost $90,000 had disappeared into a fake company connected to his girlfriend, Vanessa Reed. When Victoria slid the photos across the desk, I stopped breathing. There he was, Ryan, smiling beside another woman while holding the hand of a little boy who looked about 3 years old. His son. I remember staring at that photo, wondering how a human being could live two completely different lives without collapsing under the weight of the lies. Have you ever looked back at your entire relationship and realized every memory now feels fake? Every smile, every I love you. Because that's what betrayal does. It rewrites your entire past. That was the moment I stopped being afraid of him. Court became war. Ryan suddenly transformed into the loving husband, victimized by his unstable wife. He claimed I kidnapped Liam, claimed I was emotionally unstable from work stress, claimed I manipulated evidence. But truth leaves a trail. Text messages, recorded phone calls, financial transfers. Every lie eventually collided with proof, and the judge saw all of it. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Ryan sat in court insisting the missing money had gone toward business investments. The judge adjusted her glasses and calmly asked, "What business exactly?" Ryan froze. That silence said more than words ever could. By the end of the hearing, temporary custody of Liam was granted to me. Ryan received supervised visitation only. The financial investigation expanded. And suddenly the man who once controlled every room he walked into looked terrified for the first time in his life. But the biggest twist came weeks later. Vanessa, the girlfriend, turned on him. She admitted everything. The fake LLC, the hidden transfers, the lies Ryan told both of us. She confessed she eventually realized she'd been trapped too. Different prison. Same manipulator. The final trial lasted 3 days. When I testified, Ryan's lawyer asked the question they always ask women like me. If things were truly that bad, why did you stay? And for a second the courtroom went silent. Then I answered honestly. Because I thought staying would protect my son, until the night he handed me a phone and asked me to call Grandpa. A woman in the gallery started crying. 3 weeks later, the verdict came down. Ryan was convicted on assault and financial fraud charges. Prison sentence. Financial penalties. Everything collapsed around him exactly the way he once made my life collapse around me. But here's the thing nobody tells you about surviving something like this. The real victory wasn't the courtroom. It wasn't the sentence. It wasn't even hearing the word guilty. The real victory happened months later, on an ordinary afternoon, when I watched Liam laughing in my father's backyard, while planting tomatoes in the dirt. No fear in his eyes, no tension in his tiny shoulders. Just peace. That's when I realized healing isn't dramatic. It happens quietly, in safe homes, in deep sleep, in children laughing again. Today, Liam is 8 years old, loud, happy, obsessed with dinosaurs and volcanoes. I work full-time at a children's hospital in Portland, and twice a month I help lead support groups for women escaping abusive relationships. And every time I sit in those circles, I tell them the same thing my son unknowingly taught me that night. Asking for help is not weakness. It's survival. So if you're listening to this while hiding pain behind closed doors, if you're making excuses for someone who keeps breaking you piece by piece, please hear me carefully. Love should never require fear. And silence never saves you. The hardest call I ever made saved my life. Now I want to ask you something. If someone you loved called you at midnight begging for help, would you go? And if you were the one suffering, would you have the courage to make that call? Tell me in the comments below. Your story could be the reason someone else finally chooses to save themselves too.